we are in terms of handling a number of health issues in the country. On a population scale, we are facing the problem today of the pandemic. So let me spend a few minutes on explaining the the philosophy of the National Digital Health Mission and the current status. See, this has the National Digital Health Mission has its roots in the National Health Policy 2017, approved by the Government of India, where the key goals there are universal health coverage with citizen in the center. Imagine a country with 1.3 plus billion citizens should be in the center of the whole spectrum of activities in the health, and other important aspects being quality of care and continuum of care of the national health policy. Now, what key word here is about the ecosystem. Here we're not talking of a system. We have to raise the bar from a system perspective to an ecosystem perspective. That's an important dimension I would like to make. Where we're talking, of course, the largest segment of that ecosystem is consisting of the citizens/patients, which is 1 billion plus in this country, and also the health care industry, the insurance industry, and also the various health tech companies and other ecosystem players. So what needs to be designed is a very large and complex ecosystem. So we had this challenge in front of us 2 years ago, but I don't think it's behind us now, right? The challenge. The Government of India constituted a committee which I had the privilege of chairing in 2018 and 19, and produced the National Digital Health Blueprint, which is basically, it's not a prescriptive kind of architecture or design. It's open standards based approach that we have followed. And also the key principles are, the health records of individuals should be controlled by the individual concerned and not by any other entity. That's one fundamental point I would like to underscore. The other key principles we followed are security by design and also privacy by design. It's possible to kind of retrofit privacy into any existing systems, but that's not the best way of doing it. From day one, you should have the privacy mindset while designing each component of the architecture. So privacy by design was a very key consideration for us. And one other important feature of this is the federated nature of the architecture, which means that no data database is going to be held in a centralized manner. The data stays wherever it was created, say for instance with the health service provider or with an insurance company where it has been generated. So federated architecture really helps us in several different ways. Number one, in terms of the security, privacy, the de-risking, is distributed all over, and the responsibilities also. Apart from it, the single biggest point will be the threat to any breach of privacy. If you centralize things, obviously, you are running higher and higher risks, which is not the case here, absolutely. So there need not be any concern that, because of digital health, such a big, approach being done, is there some flip side which is the risk to that? So the federated architecture being hardcore into the whole thing has really assures us that it's not the case here. Then another important point that was the consideration is it's not as if we are starting with a clean slate or a totally green field. It is a kind of a brown field where large number of healthcare providers and government health systems as well as insurance and other players have their own IT system. So we need to design the architecture in such a manner that it carries them along. with some, a layer of interoperability built over and above what exists already, so that you are building on what is already available. So then let me come to a few questions on privacy, because that is the main concern today. Is so we have, as I mentioned already, privacy by design, which means that a set of 9 principles of fundamental principles of privacy, which have gone into a lot of our case law as well also, which is the purpose limitation, collection limitation, a minimalistic approach in whatever data you're collecting, and also notice and consent. They become very important, and sharing limitation. It's not that you have a data you can share with anybody and everybody. There are regulations about what can be shared and how it can be shared and what should not be shared. So that is one pillar of the privacy. The second pillar is the concept of privacy operation centers, which we have made part of the core of the NDHM, is the POC. We have heard of SOC for decades, Security Operations Center, which does a kind of a supervisory role over the security environment. A similar, we borrowed it into the privacy environment and created what's called a POC, Privacy Operations Center, which is first of its kind in the world globally. So it is data blind. Actually, it doesn't look at what health data it is trying to protect. It looks at the metadata and only tries to manage the privacy in a very nutshell. So POC is a unique concept we have introduced in the NDHM, second pillar. Third, and a very significant recent one that has happened, is the health data management policy. So the government of India recently in December 20, post August 15th, we have been quite active in designing all these policies and refining all the building blocks. So sometime in last week of December, this has been notified by government of India, the health data management policy, which tells what are the do's and don'ts for holding the data, sharing the data, the rights of individuals, the privacy aspects. Everything is dealt with in that policy, which is also available on the public domain. So this is one pillar. So net, what I'm saying is the privacy is looked at it from technological angle, process angle, and also the policy angle. So this is what I have to say. Currently, and a lot of consultation has gone into, at every stage we have been consulting the public in bringing out this kind of, it's an evolving architecture. We improve it at every stage. And the current stage is that we are piloting it in 6 union territories of the country, where with 4 artifacts, so to say. One is the health ID, which Akshay has just mentioned, and a doctor ID and a health facility ID and a web EMR. These 4 things are being, out of the about 30 plus building blocks, 4 have been front-ended as of now. So detailed implementation plan is underway now, so that we can address it at the population scale. There are a few challenges, but I would, in implementation going forward, but I would reserve it to a period of interaction which comes later. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful address. So my next question is to Mr. Mayank Bathwal, who is from the Aditya Birla Healthcare Insurance Firm. Sir, as we all know, the present NDHM will have a major impact on the healthcare insurance industry. So how is Aditya Birla Insurance Firm planning itself so as to implement the NDHM?
So, thank you, Dr. Akshay, and thank you to IMA for this opportunity. And what I just heard from Mr. Narayana is actually very, very, of course, pleasing to all of us, because I've been in the health insurance sector for about 5 years now, and one of the things that actually always intrigued me and to some extent disappointed me was the lack of health data in a form that can be used not for the benefit of the consumer, but even for population health management for the country of the size of India and for the health issues that we face. I think at the core is digitization of data, health data in a form that can be used for different stakeholders, right? Consumer, providers, researchers, of course, insurance players, and all other relevant stakeholders. Because if you don't have data, tell me, for example, as an insurance company, how do we price product if you don't have data in a form that can be, you can refine your pricing for specific segment of consumers, you can create new offerings. And one of the challenges that we faced was in the absence of pricing, we couldn't bring the products that consumers needed. For example, disease specific products, and there are consumers who actually want to get into the play with, maybe a specific offering and not the whole sum and so on and so forth. So that challenge is definitely something which was huge. And when we were integrating with the hospital network, and while some large hospitals had everything ready in terms of technology so that data could flow in, but in many cases there was no data exchange, like any mature country should have. I mean, papers are flowing in, right? Imagine in some cases scanned images, and in some cases faxes were flowing. I mean, that's not what a country which is providing technology to global environment should be actually seeing internally. So I'm very glad that the government has taken this task of creating a whole national digital health blueprint and the national digital health mission, which will hopefully transform the way healthcare is managed, including we as a very important part of the healthcare ecosystem as a funder. I think very importantly, I agree with Mr. Satyanarayana sir. I mean, I agree with you. It's about ecosystem. It's not about one, because healthcare is an ecosystem, and digital healthcare actually can transform the way ecosystem can happen. But at the core is data. So we are looking at this with a lot of positive thing. We are making sure that we are fully prepared. In fact, from the beginning, we put in place our own process to digitize data, to digitize documents which were coming in from our. And today there are lots of health tech players who can do it. But once once NDHM blueprint goes into full execution, then every piece of data is flowing in a form that can be used by the stakeholders, and most importantly by the patient. How many of us actually remember 15, 20-year-old medical reports of ours? Do you have them access to them today? No. So if you go to a medical provider, they don't have any record of what happened to you in the past, and they're only treating you based on what data you have now. That's not how in today's age things should happen. So we are very excited because it will help us not only play a role of paying claims, etc., efficiently, but also designing new offerings, creating much better experience, intervening for our customers who need more intervention in terms of health outcome, using the whole health ecosystem partners who can then intervene for that specific customer at the right stage, and not only at the stage where the customer is in the hospital and now you need to pay the fund. That's too late to my mind. I think today when technology, AI, ML is being leveraged on all kind of data to create much better experiences, I think that's where we need to be, and I'm very excited. As an organization, we are doing everything to be ready. We are actually working closely as an individual participant and through the industry with NHA, etc., to see what we can do, and we will make sure that we leverage this fully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayank. So my next question is to Mr. Viren. Uh, as we as we all know, means NH Hospital has always been at the forefront of implementing all the healthcare IT programs, be it the collaboration with Intel Corporation or all the world leaders in terms of healthcare IT. So how is NH seeing this opportunity as to implement the NDHM? And the next question is, means as we know, the healthcare sector is pretty much unorganized sector. So means are we seeing any specific challenges while implementing the NDHM in the hospital sector as such?
Yeah. Let me just to clarify, the NDHM is not a software. It's not something that I install tomorrow. It is a principle. It is a design philosophy. It is a series of guidelines under which hospitals, clinics, IT companies, insurance companies, providers implement the software. So we were very proactive very early on, working with the government, working with the National Health Authority, the National Digital Health Mission, to implement those principles into the software that we were building in our hospital. So that our software product, which we call Atma, which powers all our hospitals, is going to be one of the first software products in the country that is fully compliant with every single principle that the NDHML lays out, which is fully open, fully transparent, fully integratable, fully modular, accessible for hospitals and clinics and providers across the country. We are working with a couple of the teams there on building these connectors, which allow data transfer between institutions. And once we want to offer that to all the people that are willing to use it so that the data flows freely. So on that end, yes, we are fully aligned. This is the only way the sector will grow. And we believe all the other healthcare institutions and the software institutions will adopt this because this is very clearly laid out by the government that this is the direction we want you to go towards. Now, the challenges. Now, philosophically, it is one thing to say that the country should be fully digitally aligned. Practically speaking, if you are running a clinic in a rural town in India where there is no electricity, where there is no internet connection, where you don't even have computers, these things become very difficult to implement. These are the practical challenges. But it doesn't mean that this will solve all our problems overnight. This is the guiding direction for us. As a country, I have to applaud the vision of the government to say that we will leap over a lot of the infrastructure challenge that we have by setting in place the guidelines that will move this into that next level entirely. Now, forget about hospitals in the villages, hospitals in a big city. So every doctor, if you are a successful doctor, you have no less than 50 patients waiting outside your office. If every patient has to come in, sit in front of you, and you have to go and start manually searching for their file, type in the passwords, go through multiple levels of authentication and get the file, it's not going to work. The patient can give you his information verbally faster than you are able to search for it. So you need to build in systems that are a lot more friendly towards doctors and friendly for patients. But this will not happen automatically. No one has ever built it for the kind of operation that Indian doctors operate under. In the West, it is very common for doctors to spend half an hour, 1 hour with patients, and you're very patient and you're able to explain this. In India, you simply don't have that option. Forget about 15 minutes of patience. The goal of the software that we put in should be that in 5 minutes, you should be able to come to the exact problem. So that means building capabilities that don't exist in software in any part of the world. Forget about in India, which means in the time that the patient takes to walk from the front door to sit on the chair, the doctor should have on his dashboard exactly what his past history is and summarized extract from what is most relevant to what he wants right now. And in the process of data entry, there should be a guided system. In the West, they call this clinical decision support systems, which allow the doctor to make very quick, very rapid, and very standardized decision making, so that improves the quality overall. Now, these are things that don't exist. They will be built. They will be built by the close synthesis of doctors and engineers working with the government and working with the patients to build software that truly democratizes healthcare. Because if we have to just build software like Word and PowerPoint, it's not going to help. The rest of the world has that. You can just buy it. This is India. We are capable of doing amazing things. And so the challenge is on institutions of our caliber to say, look, I'm going to reduce the transaction time with the patient and the doctor using software, not just try and match what is there available. And that is the challenge we're ready to take on.
Thank you, Mr. Viren. So my next question is to Mr. J. Satyanarayana. As you know, sir, after the launch of the blueprint in the certain sections of media, so we had major concerns related to privacy, and also as we know, means the basis of this mission is the Aadhaar linkage, and as we know, the Supreme Court has presently allowed the Aadhaar integration only for banking and telecom. So, means how are we seeing these challenges?
Thanks, Akshay. I tried to touch upon the privacy aspects in my earlier intervention, keynote, but let me reiterate and reassure that the privacy concerns are being addressed in multiple dimensions, which I tried to explain before. In addition, I would like to say that a couple of other aspects to that, which is that participation in the NDHM slash health ID scheme is optional. It's not, number one, compulsory. And it's citizens' choice, end of the day. Second, you mentioned about Aadhaar and the use of Aadhaar for identification. Why do you use Aadhaar? I mean, it's such a great asset that the country has produced and stabilized and over a period. So it is for identification and authentication. But the second point I'm making is that even the use of Aadhaar in the health ecosystem is optional. We are not mandating it in any manner. If the citizen feels it's a choice of the citizen that it's more convenient way of identifying himself or herself, it's a optional, and the required notification at this has also been issued in the month of August by the Ministry of Information Technology under the Aadhaar Act, under Section 4 of the Aadhaar Act. It has been also issued. So it's an enabling provision, an optional provision at the choice of the citizen. If you want to use Aadhaar, fine. Otherwise, the other options are you can use mobile, you can use ration card, you can use passport, driving license, etc. Other options do exist. So it need not be seen as a concern or as a bottleneck in the whole issue. Number one, systemically, we are providing all the safeguards. In addition, it is optional to the citizen whether to join the scheme, and if join the scheme with or without Aadhaar. I hope that addresses the concerns significantly.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And I would like to just mention, reiterate a couple of points which are very nicely brought out by Mayank and Viren, which is in response to the insurance thing, how smoothly it can go post this. One of the components suggested there is health claims platform, which is a technology agnostic and industry agnostic, industry neutral, open source based component is also being put in place, so that there are standards across interoperability across portability across insurance companies. Is one point. HCP, it's called Health Claims Platform, is one thing. Second, in response to Viren's excellent point that end of the day, if it is not adopted at the cutting edge level, it's of no use. All great thoughts, are great just on paper, but so UX is very important, the user experience. So going forward, that will be one of the focus areas. How to maximize the user experience as a patient, as a doctor, as a health worker. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. So my next question is to Mr. Mayank. Sir, as we know, if we see the Indian healthcare insurance industry operates through multiple TPAs, and means every TPA has its own healthcare IT infrastructure. So now, after the implementation of NDHM, so do you see any hiccups in the implementation of NDHM through so many healthcare insurance firms and so many healthcare TPAs across the country? Sir, I think you are on.
Yeah, sorry. As some of my previous speakers mentioned, that this is a journey, this is a process. I mean, it will not happen in a day. Something like this, for our size of country, number of stakeholders, unlike Western, mature countries where you find the number of hospital chains and all are not as many as you see, smaller, big nursing homes, big hospitals, small hospital, small labs, big labs, etc. So I think it's a process and journey. The point is that there is a framework, a blueprint of the kind of standards that we need, which is being put in place. And we have, as Mr. Satyanarayana mentioned, to start with, it is not being mandated. So, gradually we'll want adoption to increase. As people start seeing benefits, my sense is more and more adoption will happen. On the claims part in particular, the number of TPAs, etc. See, in the long term, the way we are working now is not a solution, because you cannot have, let's say, even if you start doing technology integration between, let's say, Viren's organization and my organization, right? It is not possible, because for Viren to go and integrate with multiple insurance companies, it's a hell of a task. And similarly, for us to go and integrate with not just Viren's organization with multiple hospitals, not just possible. So therefore, the health claims platform, the exchange, the pipe that typically is there in all countries. Ultimately, what NDHM is going to do is to create that, the technology framework for that pipe, which will sit in between the providers and the insurers, payers, and where the data will flow through that pipe, right? And today NDHM is creating one which can be used. There could be more than one, claims platform. It's just a standard, and even private organization like Swasth, they're trying to help NDHM. They're proposing that some of the standards which can be used by any private organization or government organization. So as these exchanges of pipes start coming in, maybe to start with what NHA is proposing, under the NDHM or other pipes that can get, even IRD is working through IIB, a similar claims platform. So my sense is that as these things start coming in, both sides, the provider side and the payer side, with and from on the payer side, it could be either payers directly or TPAs as administrators, whichever way it happens, they will start adopting and integrating with that pipe, and the whole process will become much simpler, right? For example, if I go and connect to the pipe and Viren connects to the pipe, then all of us are now have one integration to do, or maybe then you two or three such exchanges of pipes. I mean, I'm doing two or three such things, right? And that's done as long as we are adopting the principles that has been laid out. It will take time, but I think it's a beginning. And I think the important point was to set the standards, set the framework, and then I'm sure that with public and private participation, we will have all these movements happening. And I think that's what we need. It has to start, and gradually we'll see these things gradually evolving, and we'll start finding solutions.
Absolutely, sir. So my next question is to Mr. Viren. So, sir, as we know, hospital, the hospital sector, as in the hospital, hospital has interfaces with multiple sectors, as in be it the healthcare insurance industry or the pharma industry or plus various other industries. So, how do you see it as a challenge of integrating the hospital IT system with all these types of stakeholders, be it the pharmacies, or be it the healthcare insurances, or be it buying the consumables from multiple stakeholders?
There are two problems with integration. Usually it is a one-time exercise, assuming that most of the software that is on the other side has what is called have APIs that allow us to access data back and forth. The problem is large institutions such as insurance companies and larger hospitals have the resources and have invested in software, and so they can be modified to accept data going up and down. The problem is that smaller hospitals, clinics, pharmacies have some software, not great, but those are more for basic data entry and accounting, and don't really have APIs that we are able to read, and don't really have the sort of full-time connectivity, data backups, or have people that are digitally literate on the other side who will be able to understand the requirements. So it is definitely, like both Mr. Satyanarayana and Mayank have mentioned, it's something that is going to take quite a fair bit of time, but it will be made useful because at least now we are all speaking the same language. Well, before it used to be that in my hospital we speak in Kannada, and another hospital they speak in Urdu, and another hospital speak in Bengali. Today we all have a translator that is able to build things according to the same spec. The other, what will happen is that a lot of standardization is going to occur. Once it becomes clear that software will follow the common design standards, the common principles of data transference, it will be that, so for example, the software we are building, it's not just meant for our hospital, we can offer it to multiple hospitals, and it's not just for big hospitals. We want to offer it to small hospitals free of cost, because we believe that the net gains to society by having a huge amount of digital information and backups of patient information will accrue to the overall health sector. So it's better for everyone that we are all on a digital platform. Similarly, from the insurance industry, there will come entrepreneurs who will come forward and say, look, we will build a common connecting platform. Tomorrow for clinics, there are enough and more software providers out there who will build clinic platforms. So it is a solvable problem, but at this point, given the current state of the technology that exists, it is not easy to do. If any entrepreneur comes and looks at the IT landscape right now, they will completely give up in frustration because there are simply too many providers and too many challenges to solve. But for this, we have to, sincerely thank the government for making our lives so much easier for the next 10 years. Because without this, it would have just simply never happened.
Thank you, Mr. Viren. Next question is to Mr. J. Satyanarayana, sir. So, sir, if you see the total healthcare infrastructure of India, so we have a number of PHCs and healthcare and wellness center. So, how are we planning to implement NDHM in the rural area PHCs and also the healthcare, health and wellness centers across parts of India?
Yeah, I think the question again, I take a sentence from what Viren has said, which is that, how do you take care of the rural settings, small clinics, and those who cannot have a full-fledged IT infrastructure or capability? So it can come in several different ways, one of which is that we create a set of simple open source components, which are called the reference building blocks, and make it available as freely downloadable applications. So that is also very clearly spelled out in the NDHB that these building blocks will be made available to whoever wants to make use of them. It will be, reducing the cost and also enhance the attractiveness of adoption in these SME and small clinics and rural areas. Second element is that it's not as if only big IT companies can come out with big health products, health tech products, and they survive in the market. Another situation we have created is the NDHM sandbox environment, which is operational since the last week of August, and we got almost about 400 entries there, where the small startups also, they pick up the APIs and then they build a solution which will fit different kinds of scenarios that exist in such a tremendously diverse sector, like health. You can't have a single point solution which will work everywhere. So you need to have that, address the diversity. So we have created that sandbox environment as well, where the entrepreneurs can come in there, get into the sandbox, try out that product, that it is compliant from technological standards point of view and from regulatory point of view, from privacy point of view. It's tested out in the sandbox and then launched, for implementation. So these are the several different multiple prongs of approach is required. And I have to underline the need for a large amount of effort in the areas of awareness and education of stakeholders and capacity building in this space in the next 1 to 2 years.
Thank you, sir. So my question is to Mr. Mayank and Mr. Viren, respectively. So presently we are having the chief advisor for the NDHM with us. So are there any specific top 3 recommendations on behalf of respective industries to the NDHM so as to implement the NDHM scheme seamlessly across the country?
I see. I think one of the good things about the way NDHM, is being implemented and must complement the entire NHA team and other body, that NHA is constantly having dialogues with all the stakeholders. We have had, like, for example, conversations. The entire insurance group has had 2 or 3 rounds of conversation already with the senior NHA team, right? From the NHA CEO to the other technical experts and all. And it's not one time, it's an ongoing conversation which is available. They have given us an opportunity to write, share our feedback. So so frankly, I don't have any specific request here, because a lot of the input from our side has already gone. A lot of this work is being done with inputs from the private side also, and also, of course, the public insurance companies. So the point is that as an insurance category, we are actively engaging. Our feedback is being taken a lot. In fact, for example, there is leveraging. I'm just probably digressing a bit, but the work that they did in creating the whole technology architecture for Ayushman Bharat, in some way it will also help in the claims management. The blueprint as we create a larger health claims management platform. Now they're saying, use that platform and leverage it for other private insurance to cover the missing middle. So I think a lot of dialogues are going on. I'm sure that this will go on in the future only. So my only hope and expectation, and which I have no reason to believe will not happen, is that as this dialogue happens on an ongoing basis in the future, I'm sure as questions emerge, as comments come up, as thoughts emerge, we will be able to share them and come up with something that can be implemented by all relevant stakeholders. Because it is going to be a tough task. There is no question about it. Let's be very clear. It's not going to be an easy task. But as long as conversations are happening, dialogues are happening on an ongoing basis, I think we can find solutions to problems as they emerge.
And the only thing I would add to that is, as we are building out these solutions, there is definitely a lot that we can learn from the Western countries that have tread this path before, but probably we should not follow it too closely. An example I would give is in the United States a couple of years ago, they wanted to really push through the adoption of electronic health records, and they passed an act called the High-Tech Act, which essentially mandated and forced hospitals into using the digital tools that were available. And a lot of people fought back and they said, look, it's too expensive, we can't afford it. And so what the government then did, they gave these massive subsidies, anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 to a couple of clinics to set up the software. It did not do even one bit to improve the quality of the software. All it did was to transfer more money from the government to the couple of providers who benefited from that. What I would say is the government has done a very good job of defining the direction that we have to go to, and it's the role of industry to start putting in systems that address usability and pushing for. It is an admirable goal to get through to 100% digital literacy, but if we force people into it, you would be pushing hospitals and doctors into suboptimal solutions right now that will make life worse than what it was before. As Dr. Shetty, our founder, always likes to say, doctors were not built by God to type. And so if you give a good doctor a keyboard, he will throw the keyboard on your face. And which is true, because essentially the way the UX has moved on, it goes beyond keywords and tabs and a lot of the current design parameters. There are ways we need to transcend that. A lot of the current systems, ours included, aren't yet friendly towards the way doctors operate, but we were building towards it. So while we must get digitized, we should not, in our zeal to get 100% adoption, push too far right now people towards systems they may not be 100% comfortable with. And there is an element of encouragement and there are some incentives that can be done to adopt it. And eventually, people will voluntarily implement systems that, like I mentioned earlier, reduce the time for consultation from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. If by forcing him to put a computer, it turns a 15-minute interaction into a 25-minute interaction, you can be sure in a month's time, that computer will be collecting dust. And that is the sad truth of every digitization effort in not just government hospitals, in private hospitals, and in my own hospitals, where computers collect dust because they don't make the doctor or patient's life easier.
Thank you, Mr. Viren. So now means we have some audience questions coming. So the first question is to Mr. J. Satyanarayana. Sir, one audience has asked, could you please elaborate on the exact strategy for the digitization of handwritten prescriptions and the diagnostic reports of smaller clinics and hospitals? And also, what are the softwares that are proposed to be used for this?
Yeah, as I think it has come out very clearly in the earlier conversation as well that number one size does not fit all is one. Number two, there is no forcing of any particular software or particular option on any multiple options to exist, and it's a kind of a voluntary and enthusiastic approach from the industry that is required if it is to be successful. Mere mandating, bringing a law, etc., may not be the good answer. I perfectly agree with Viren in that respect. Now, in terms of e-prescription, while again there are several options. One is, even for some time till people are comfortable with it and more efficiencies are gained, even a handwritten prescription can be post facto, it can be scanned and uploaded, for instance, or classically e-prescription which complies with the standards is keyed into the system. So both options are available depending on your own preferences and possibilities. You can make a choice there. So it's the choice of the physician, choice of the hospital, choice of the clinic, which way both are envisaged under the existing system. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So the next audience question is for Mr. Viren. Sir, how can the blockchain how can the blockchain architecture help the healthcare ecosystem, and then what are the key use cases in India?
Usually when people say blockchain, I stop listening. See, no doubt, I'm sure someone more technologically advanced than me can make a very impassioned argument for how blockchain, being a system of record that's completely decentralized, will be able to hold data secure. But the fact is, it is subject to a lot of critical vulnerabilities and is not the most efficient way of storing information. There was a New York Times article I read recently about these Bitcoin billionaires who are completely locked out of their the money that they have in Bitcoins, millions and millions of dollars, because they forgot the password. Now, if you put in something that is so secure that you're not able to access it in case you forget, and let me assure you that the one thing people forget most often in India is the health records, myself included. If you ask me to find my health files from 4 years ago, I'll not be able to find it. So it, in a completely permissionless system that is decentralized, may not be the best way. But again, I'm neither very technologically literate nor a blockchain enthusiast. So there are people that can make a much better argument than me. I would say in the short term, let us solve the more basic challenges. Let us solve the fact that data has to move from paper to a computer. Once we get to that point, then we can worry about the best system for transmitting that.
Absolutely right, sir. So the next audience question is for Mr. Mayank. What are the key steps taken by the insurance industry to drive the adoption of technology by the NDHM? So that is a question for Mr. Mayank.
Yeah, so in terms of drive the adoption, adoptions, I mean, the execution has not really started happening. These are early days. What is important right now is to be prepared in terms of what is it that will need to be done at the technology and at our end to be able to meet the suggested standards and guidelines that are being issued, and that also is in a way work in progress, because it will take some time. Having said that, there are institutions which are working. For example, SWAST is an institution which is trying to create the framework of what would the standards be of as we start getting into execution of that. So there are many. One of the key focus of that institution is to look at health claims platform and whatever will require to be done from a technology perspective to be prepared for that. And we, like many other insurance companies, are participating very actively in that, so that we set standards which are agreeable to us and that we are ready for. And again, as I said, different organizations are participating together in that, so that we can set standards which everyone is comfortable and happy with. At the same time, it's an ongoing conversation that we, in any case, keep having a different stakeholders and providers, and of course, our biggest stakeholders in that context. And how do we be ready as these things evolve? So I think it's a process, and as the frameworks and the standards are evolving, we are making sure that we are ready to launch them at the right time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayank. So the final question is for Dr. Satyanarayana, sir. Sir, the question is, what is the role of pharma industry in the implementation of NDHM?
Yeah, as the other speakers also mentioned that while the overall blueprint and the architecture have those building blocks for pharma also, there is the building block or standard specifications around e-pharmacy, which is again linked to the e-prescription, in ideal conditions. I'm not saying that it will happen tomorrow, but where the prescription and the medications prescribed in the various practitioners go directly to the pharmacy, and then the citizen can access it from there. So e-pharmacy is another concept, but it is somewhere in the phase 2 or phase 3 that it will be realized. But pharma as a sector, it has several other connotations in the sense of manufacturing of drug supply chain, quality control, etc., etc. I'm talking of what touches the citizen is the pharmacy, which is included in the later phases of NDHM, but not in the phase 1. You are on mute, please.
Our final question is to Mr. J. Satyanarayana, sir. Sir, key steps on priority that may help in creating a data ecosystem for health in India. So, what are the top 3 steps in priority?
Yeah, let me say again, reiterate that data is the very important, very sensitive, and the largest component of the predicator of success for NDHM. So the adoption of standards, I would say, if you ask me, is the most important aspect in the whole thing. So we have the footprint of these standards is so very large, like Viren was mentioning. Whether you take it FHIR, Fire Release 4, they say, or whether you take SNOMED CT or LOINC or other standards which have been prescribed. Each one of them has a very large footprint, and it will add to the number of clicks and number of the time spent on the computer versus with the patient. That risk is there. So what we have done is that we have chiseled it out. Don't blindly take the whole standard which has been developed elsewhere in different environment. Take the minimal footprint that is required out of that standard and then go with it first. Is one proactive suggestion we have made in the report. And we have also, so for instance, FHIR has 146 resources total. We have recommended only 26 of them as seminal to the entire healthcare, insurance, and the entire ecosystem at this phase 1. So being minimalistic in approach is one major principle here. Think big, start small, scale fast. So that's what I would say. We are adopting that philosophy here in NDHM.
Absolutely right, sir. So I think we are now towards the end of the session. So I would like to thank all the speakers for their key insights on NDHM and also on respective sectors and industry. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, dear esteemed panel, for your valuable time and insights. We truly appreciate it. I would also like to thank our valued partners, Google, InMobi, Facebook, Microsoft, Zendesk, Adobe, Infobip, Freshworks, and Tata Teleservices. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be back after a short 10-minute break. Please do visit the expo hall and check out the booths on display. Thank you.